What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. Today we're going game by game, talking about the running backs I'd be starting and sitting this week. As always, if I don't answer your specific questions in this video, you can always see my exact rankings and projections at our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. So, we're going to running back in a second, but first, of course, have to start things off as usual, the stat of the day. There was no stat for yesterday's video, since Darren missed another video. I don't think that he's going to be making videos for the rest of the season. Definitely won't be next year, but it's a fluid situation. I'll update you guys when I know more about that. As for today's stat, so far this season, only one tight end has at least 65 targets, but less than 500 receiving yards. Who is it? All right, so let's talk about some running backs. First up, we're going to go over Ravens at Bears. This game has a 45-point total, so like slightly below average, and the Ravens are 5-point road favorites. For the Ravens, they released Le'Veon Bell this week, which means that the backfield's down to Latavius and Freeman. Basically, the release of Bell indicates that like Latavius is expected back this week. They would not release Le'Veon Bell if they weren't expecting Latavius Murray to be active. So assume that it's Latavius and Freeman, with Tyson Williams maybe being active, but of course he doesn't get any touches every week. I would expect Freeman to get slightly more work and for some of his work to come through the air, whereas Latavius doesn't really get any work through the air, and he'll be their third down back. Murray is a larger threat to Freeman's workload than Bell was, so neither of them is all that appealing this week. The Bears aren't like a fantastic football team, but they do have like an okay, at least, run defense. It's not fantastic. It's like fairly neutral matchup. I just don't think that the total opportunities, when you take away, of course, passing, then you take away Lamar Jackson running, then you split the rest of the running back carries, which are mostly going to be carries, between two guys. It doesn't leave enough volume. So personally, I think both of them can be viewed as like really low-end options, with Freeman being better, but I would rather just stay away from this one. For the Bears, Montgomery was a feature back in week 9 before their bye. I was not expecting that to happen, but given that that happened, then he had a full week to get even more healthy, because he probably wasn't like 100% in week 9. You got to assume he's 100% at this point. If they were featuring him before, I'm not expecting Herbert to be any part of the any real part of the game plan. He'll obviously come in, like Montgomery's not going to play 100% of snaps, right? But Montgomery's going to get enough work where you're starting him, and Herbert's not going to get enough work unless Montgomery gets hurt again. So I think that Herbert is best just kept on benches as a very high upside handcuff, because we know he's going to be really, really good in fantasy if Montgomery went down, but someone that we basically can't use anymore, which I honestly did not see coming. Packers at Vikings is up next. This game has a pretty high 49.5-point total, and the Packers are 2.5-point road favorites. This should be one of the better games of the week, and so it's one of the games that I'm like really excited to watch. Should be very high scoring, should be a lot of fantasy production. For the Packers, Aaron Jones should miss like a week or two with this knee injury, which means we're going to get to see A.J. Dillon as a featured running back. He is a must play as a running back one in any weeks that Jones is going to miss, and I don't really care what the matchup is. You are playing A.J. Dillon. Don't care who you have on your bench. He is a running back one. For the Vikings, it's the same as always. Whenever Dalvin Cook is active, play him. Whenever he's inactive, play Madison. Pretty simple. From a great game to basically a dumpster fire, we go to the Dolphins at the Jets now. This game has a 44.5-point total, so not a horrible total, but below average. And the Dolphins are 3.5-point road favorites. For the Dolphins, this is the single best matchup that you can have. The Jets have allowed the most schedule-adjusted fantasy points to the running back position, and it's by a mile. They just allow so much production because they can never be competitive in a game. This is a really good spot for Gaskin, who has averaged 14 carries and 4 targets per game in their 3 wins this season. And he's doing so also in a game, obviously, I'm saying that because I think they're going to win, and it's against a really, really bad defense in general. Now, you could argue that his reception upside is lowered because it's a game we're expecting them to win, and they're not going to throw to running backs as much if they're winning. But I would counter that by saying, well, you know what? He's gotten the 4 targets in their wins so far. It's only a 3.5-point spread, so Vegas is not projecting the Jets to go out there and lose by 20, right? It's supposed to be a relatively competitive game because Miami's not that good either. And so I think Gaskin is a really strong option. If they do happen to fall behind, he'll get receptions. If they happen to stay ahead, he'll get plenty of carries. He's got good scoring chances. I think you're playing Gaskin if you have him. For the Jets, Tevin Coleman returned last week, and that took touches away from both Ty Johnson and Michael Carter. But even with that happening and them losing 45-17, so just a complete and utter blowout, Carter still got 16 carries and 6 targets on 52% of the snaps. So he's still going to get work no matter what the game script is. And of course, we're not expecting them to lose 45-17. I would have much more confidence in Carter, in Tyson Williams, if Mike White was a starting quarterback because he loves to throw a dump off to the running backs. But with Flacco this week, we can't be sure that the receptions are going to be there. It's been very dependent on who the quarterback is for Carter, for Johnson. And so moving to Flacco, we don't know if they're going to get these targets. Because of that, I still think Carter's a decent option as running back too, especially because this is like a good matchup for running backs in a game that they could win. But I think that I'd rather keep Ty Johnson on the bench because especially in a full PPR league, there are quarterbacks on this team where if they're starting, he gets a ton of receptions. And so I'd rather keep him on the bench. Also, he'd be the guy if Carter went down that would get most of the touches. He'd be the one I'd want. And then Coleman, just no. It's Ty Johnson. It's Michael Carter. Those are the guys they want to feature right now, at least mostly. But the only one I'd be considering right now is Michael Carter. And again, it's a lower end option this week. Next up, we've got Saints at Eagles. This game has a pretty low 43.5-point total. And the Eagles are now 2-point favorites. There's been a little bit of line movement for that one this week. I did check. I don't think it's weather related. I don't think it's injury related, as we'll talk about with the Saints now. Like, you could argue that the line could be moving in favor of the Eagles because they expect Alvin Kamara to miss. But one, running backs don't typically shift lines. Like, even when a starting running back goes down, you don't usually see the line change because running backs don't like matter all that much to the offense's success. There are like very few running backs that matter. Of course, Alvin Kamara is going to hurt the upside of the offense, but it'd be by like a point. Like, you wouldn't see that much movement in the line if Kamara is in or out, and especially if it's like questionable, right? It's not like he was absolutely going to play and then declare it out. That might shift the line. If someone's questionable, I mean, the line's not really going to move that much when things are still questionable for him. I think Kamara's going to play this week. But it's honestly easy to break down regardless, so it's not even worth going over if he's going to play, if he's not going to play. If he's out there, play him. If he's not out there, play Mark Ingram. I mean, it's that simple. I would not play Mark Ingram if Kamara was active. Ingram would still get touches. He'd still get some receptions, some opportunity at goal line work, but I don't think it's a good enough spot, high enough scoring game. It's a pretty low total game, kind of a gross game environment. I personally would not play Ingram if Kamara misses, and again, play Kamara if he's out there. For the Eagles, it is possible Miles Sanders returns this week, but I don't believe we're going to know for sure until Saturday. That's when they can fully activate him and play him. They don't really have to decide before then. So tough to know. This is really just a horrible spot, though. I mean, everyone knows the Saints have one of the best run defenses in the NFL, and you say, okay, Miles Sanders is back. Well, it'll be his first game back, assuming he's back. It'll be his first game back, and we already know that Jordan Howard is going to split touches with him. So I wouldn't be too excited about anyone under that circumstance. And then even if Miles Sanders is still out, do I really want to play Jordan Howard against the Saints? He's not going to catch a pass, so he has to have 60 or 70 rushing yards and a score to be worth starting. I can probably find better than that on my bench or even maybe on free agency. And so honestly, no matter what happens, I don't love any of the Eagles running backs this week, even with their shift towards more running. So even with them putting an emphasis on the ground game, it's not a good spot, and they split among so many guys that honestly, no matter what happens this week, I would rather, I'm just hoping that Miles Sanders returns and that we can just see a week what the split's going to be, even though they've said he's going to be the starter still. I want to see the split, but I don't want to play anyone on the Eagles running back core. Colts at Bills is up next. This game is a 50-point total, and the Bills are 7-point home favorites for the Colts. This is a tough spot, but obviously always start Jonathan Taylor. I would keep Hines on benches this week. There's definitely a chance that the Colts get down, that this turns into more of a Hines game, although they're still willing to use Jonathan Taylor in the receiving game. But, if they go down by 2-3 scores, we're seeing a lot of Nyheim Hines. So that's still possible. But I'm not expecting them to get destroyed. I think it'll be competitive for most of the game. I don't think that Buffalo's going to go out there and go up 21-0 in the first quarter. And as long as this game is remotely close, we're still going to see Jonathan Taylor in there plenty. And I would just rather use Hines in games where the Colts total is really high. And it's not necessarily that they're down a ton because they're not scoring. It's that they're playing a team that's putting up a bunch of points and they have to keep up, but they're still behind. That's when I want to use Hines. And I don't think that's the most likely game script here. I think that if they get they get down big, I think it's because they're not scoring at all. And if they're not scoring at all, well, I don't want Nyheim Hines, right? So I don't think it's a great spot to use them. But if you needed to, as a lower end 2 in a full PPR league, definitely, then it'd be fine. But I'd prefer not to use Hines this week. For the Bills, also a brutal matchup. The Colts rank 2nd in rush defense DVOA, 8th fewest schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed to the running back position. We also had a 2 running back rotation before with Moss and Singletary. Well, now they added in Matt Breida last week. And so now we have a 3 running back rotation. Breida didn't get much work, but he honestly looked decent. And so could this be at some point in the season even split? Maybe. And that is awful news for us, especially in a brutal matchup. I would personally not play any Buffalo running back this week. Lions at Browns up next. This game has a 43.5 point total, so another low total game. And the Browns are massive 11.5 point home favorites for the Lions. Swift had 33 carries and 6 targets last week, which is a wild amount of opportunities. 39 opportunities is crazy. That was entirely due to game flow, due to going to overtime, playing the entire overtime quarter. Also, we have Jefferson gets hurt, Williams is out, so it was the perfect spot and perfect outcome for Swift. Don't ever expect him to get 33 carries again. He could approach 30 total touches sometimes, but don't expect that game script to happen again. Regardless, it doesn't matter if we're expecting 39 touches or 25 touches or 20 touches. You're starting DeAndre Swift, no matter the matchup, especially. The Browns have a good defense, but they got ripped apart by the Patriots ground game last week. So you got to think Swift is going to have at least a decent game. You're starting him. For the Browns, Nick Chubb is expected back. And so if he's back, play him obviously in a smash spot as a huge home favorite against a bad run defense. Yeah, definitely play him. You can play D'Ernest Johnson as a lower end 2 in deeper formats. But remember that the last time Johnson played really well when Chubb and Hunt were out, Chubb returned, and Johnson had 4 carries and 1 reception on 18 snaps. And so he is absolutely not a lock to do anything now that Nick Chubb is expected back. Obviously, if Chubb wasn't back, play D'Ernest Johnson. But yeah, I don't have D'Ernest Johnson. I wasn't lucky enough to get him last week. But if I had him this week, I wouldn't be playing him because Chubb is back. You're basically just trying to get lucky that he falls into the end zone, and you don't want to rely on that. Next up, we've got the football team at the Panthers. This game has another low total, 43 points, and the Panthers are 3.5 point home favorites. In what I expect to be Cam Newton's first start this year, at least, with the Panthers. For the football team, Gibson set a career high with 26 touches last week, but it's worth noting that 10 of them came on the last drive of the game, right? That huge 10.5-minute drive, 19 plays, 10 of them go to Antonio Gibson. Listen, that's not going to happen every week. Take out that drive, and it wasn't that fantastic of a performance. Also, this is not a great spot. Panthers have a really strong run defense, 2nd fewest schedule-adjusted fantasy points allowed to running backs. I think you're playing Gibson as a low-end 2, just understanding that, his floor is also obviously, low. We've seen him go out and do really well and then do nothing the next week. This is a tough spot. And if they fall behind, they could use McKissick a lot more than people would like. And so not a fantastic spot for Gibson, but I do still think you're playing him. I wouldn't play McKissick because it's kind of the same thing with Hines. I want to play McKissick in games where I do expect Washington to be down, but be down and still scoring, still moving the ball, right? I don't expect the Panthers to go out there and just score on every single drive and for the football team to be catching up but still moving the ball downfield. I expect this to be a kind of gross game, relatively low scoring, and the football team to always be in it. And if that's the case, it's not really a spot for McKissick. So I wouldn't play him, but it's the same thing as Hines. If you need him in a deep full PPR league, he's fine. For the Panthers, pretty easy. Now that McCaffrey's healthy, always start him. Don't start anyone else. 49ers at Jaguars is up next. This game has a relatively average, a little large, 44 or 45.5 point total. And the 49ers are almost a touchdown road favorites. So big road favorites here. For the 49ers, Elijah Mitchell broke his finger Monday night, but then he had surgery to put some pins in place, and he's actually expected to play this week. That is, pretty impressive for him to be able to play. If he does play him as running back too, and I wouldn't be starting Jeff Wilson. If he's out, I would expect Jeff Wilson just assume the lead back role to basically take all the touches that Mitchell was going to have, and so I do the same thing. Like, I think that Mitchell's better than Jeff Wilson, so you downgrade a little bit, but it's like you're absolutely playing Elijah Mitchell's running back 2 if he plays, and then Jeff Wilson would just be like a good running back 2 if Mitchell is out, and you're not touching Trey Sermon. This is not an opportunity to play him. For the Jaguars, James Robinson returned last week. He received 16 touches on 59% of the snaps, and he's got another week to be healthy, so I would expect the snaps to go up, the touches to go up if they have the opportunity to give him the touches, right? Like, he could go in and play 70% of the snaps and only see like 15 touches because maybe they don't have the ball all that much, because the 49ers are going to reduce the amount of plays that the Jaguars have. If they can sustain long drives, they can run the ball a ton, that's going to drain the clock. That's not going to be good for Jaguars players. The matchup is not fantastic also. The 49ers still have a decent defense, but it's only like slightly negative, right? They're not some like monster defense that we're avoiding. I think because of the expected volume we're still expecting from James Robinson, you're playing him as a 2, but it's one with a little bit of a lower floor than we'd like because of that fact that if the 49ers get up and they just keep running the ball, well, if, the Jaguars only have 8-9 possessions in the game, how much work can Robinson really do? Now you're much more dependent on a touchdown, which we cannot guarantee. And so still running back 2, just understand the floor is a little bit lower than usual. And honestly, the ceiling as well. Next up, we've got the Texans at the Titans. This one has another low, 44.5 point total, and the Titans are 10-point home favorites. For the Texans, no, don't play the running backs. For the Titans, McNichols has a concussion, and so we'll just have to see. I mean, I don't know if he's going to pass concussion protocol or not. If he is able to play this week, then I still think this is the best spot for Foreman because Tennessee's going to be up. He's the one getting more of the touches, but it'd be more of a Foreman and Peterson game. If he is out, so if McNichols does not play this week, then I think you could use both Foreman and Peterson. It would basically just be who do you think scores the touchdown. But honestly, they could have 2 rushing touchdowns. They could have 3 rushing touchdowns in this game. Like, the Titans are going to score a lot of points against Houston, and a lot of teams like to score on the ground against Houston. And so if McNichols is out, you're really only going to have Foreman and Peterson as the running backs, so that's much better. If McNichols is playing, now you have 3 guys that could get the touchdowns, the snaps, the targets, and it's not as good because it's a much bigger guessing game if that happens. So again, just to reiterate, if McNichols plays, Foreman's honestly the only one that I really want to play, but you could play McNichols or Peterson as lower end options. If McNichols is out, I think Foreman and Peterson can both be played at running back too. Obviously, neither of them just a lock to score, but I think they'd be decent options with my lean towards Foreman because he's looked better and he's getting more touches. Next up, we've got the Bengals at the Raiders. This game has a pretty high 49.5 point total, and the Bengals are 1-point road favorites coming off of their bye. For the Bengals, pretty easy. Always start Joe Mixon. For the Raiders, the Bengals do have a really strong run defense. They're also coming off their bye. That's usually a positive for teams. If the game script also turns out to be negative, so if the Raiders fall behind, Jacobs is at risk of losing touches to Drake, so he's got a lower floor than you'd like. I still think you're playing Jacobs as running back too because he's been getting some receptions. He'll get goal line work. He'll still be used a decent amount, and so he's running back too, but a lower floor option. Drake is fine if you think that the Bengals get ahead early because he's seen obviously more touches in a game script or he's expected to see more touches in the game script where the Bengals get up, the Raiders have to throw the ball. They're not going to use Jacobs as much in that script. But it's worth noting that they've lost their last 2 games and Jacobs has only seen 10 and 6 touches. So I personally wouldn't feel great about using Kenyon Drake, especially because it's only a 1-point spread. So while I think the Bengals win, it's a 1-point spread. So it should be relatively close. They're still going to use Jacobs if it's close. And so I prefer not to use him. But again, if you think the Bengals win, you're in a full PPR league, you can use Kenyon Drake as a lower end option. Next up, Cardinals at Seahawks. This game has a 48.5 point total, and the Cardinals are 2.5 point road favorites. For the Cardinals, we'll get another week of James Conner and Eno Benjamin as the two running backs. We saw the floor on James Conner last week. He's not a slam dunk to go off, even if we have him graded out as a running back 1. No running back as a lock. But he should still, again, this week be played as a running back 1, given that he's got a decent touch floor. He's got crazy high touchdown upside. He's who they're going to use when they get close. I think you're still playing him, but understand that, no running back is a lock. Eno Benjamin can be played as like a lower end option in deeper leagues, but if you're in anything that's 14 teams and less, you're probably not playing Eno Benjamin. I would say once you get into 16 team leagues, he's fine, but in general, at this point, he's just like a high upside bench option. If James Conner went down, Eno Benjamin would be great, but other than that, you're not actually starting him right now. The Seahawks, I have no idea what to think with Chris Carson. He could return this week and look fine. He could be out the rest of the season. I honestly don't know what's going to happen. You're just going to have to wait until Saturday, Sunday, know what his status is. My guess right now, reading the reports, is that he's going to be out. But again, I don't know. I don't know what this injury is going to result in for the rest of the season. And so just pay attention to the news there. If he plays, I don't really want to play any of them. This is not a fantastic spot, and we really have no idea what the split's going to be. If he's out again, then Alex Collins will be the only playable running back for the Seahawks. He should get around 10 to 15 touches, depending on game script, probably 0 receptions, maybe 1 reception in the receiving game. That makes him a viable running back too, but a lower floor option, lower end option, someone that I'd be totally fine benching. Cowboys at Chiefs is up next. This game has a very high 56-point total, and the Chiefs are 2.5 point home favorites. For the Cowboys, always start Zeke, and Pollard is a viable low-end running back 2 option in like a 12 or a 14-team league. Not in love with him in 8 or 10-team leagues, but as you start gaining in the league size, he becomes a more viable option. I'm just not in love with him because while the Chiefs have, a pretty mediocre defense, while this is a very high total game, it's not necessarily a massive total game for Dallas. It's only a really high total because they have another team on the other side scoring points. But there are plenty of weeks where Dallas has a much higher team total than this week. And so I'm not in love with Pollard as a play. He'll probably be in the rankings in like that 28 to 32 range. So it really just depends on what your running back core is. If you've got multiple running backs that are in the top 25, play them. If not, he's a fine option because they'll still be touchdowns. He can still score. We're not expecting Dallas to go out there and destroy the Chiefs. We're not expecting, 40 from Dallas. And so personally, I think he's fine, but not great. For the Chiefs, it is starting to look like Clyde is going to be out until after their Week 12 bye. So they would play this week, go on bye in Week 12, then he'd come back in Week 13. That's seeming likely. If that is the case, we're going to have another week where Darrell Williams is ranked as a running back 2, has clear running back 1 upside. I think that it's possible that he ends up in that 12, 13 kind of range. And so you could call that 1, you could call that 2, depends on your league size. But he'd be a strong play. You'd be playing Darrell Williams. I don't care what I call him. You're playing him if Clyde is out. If Clyde plays, we got to see reports, right? How much are they going to use him? Is it going to be a 50-50 split? Is he just going to mix in? I don't know what's going to happen. And so watch the rankings if Clyde plays. But again, it's seeming like Clyde will be out this week, bye next week. Clyde returns in Week 13, and then we'll reassess there. The Sunday night game is going to be Steelers at Chargers. This game has a 47-point total, and the Chargers are 5.5 point home favorites. This is an easy one to break down. Always start Najee Harris. Always start Austin Eckler. The Monday night game is going to be Giants at Bucks. This one has a pretty high 49.5 point total, and the Bucks are 10.5 point home favorites. For the Giants, Saquon is expected back this week, and if that happens, you are playing him, even against one of the most difficult matchups for opposing running backs. If he is out, then Booker is going to be a fine running back too. Obviously a terrible spot, but he's been a featured back while Barkley has been out, and so if you have a feature back, it doesn't matter what the matchup is, you'd be playing Booker. So whoever's a starting running back, play him. For the Bucks, Ronald Jones had 1 snap last week. Giovanni Bernard had 2 touches. Like, this is Leonard Fournette's backfield. He needs to be played, especially in this great spot as a low-end running back 1. So that is my breakdown of every backfield this week. Remember, you can see my exact rankings under every scoring format by just looking at our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. That, my friends, is the end of this one. Hope you all enjoy. If you did, now how about hitting the like button, and how about subscribing to the channel if you're new here? But thanks for watching.